Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 37. Even though my document here shows 36, I just repurposed what I was going to do for 36. But let's be honest, for episode 36, it really wasn't necessary to write a document. It wouldn't have been, good co-host of mine who's named.
This is Boom. Hello.
And you're listening to, I'm not going to do also like last time where I didn't say the name of the show until toward the end. You're listening right now to Endless Conversation Loop. Today is April 18th, 2025. And, I feel like we kind of just got to really jump into this. We got a little bit of a jam-packed episode today between this new sort of setup we've got going where it's almost like, one person's got a mini topic and one person's got a major topic, because I think this might be the longest note sheet we have so far.
I mean, it's been one of those situations, I think, of, we're still kind of getting our footing since you have gone how long doing this without a co-host at this point, and, well, I haven't done it, period, so I'm still fairly new at this.
Well, there's that, and there's just a lot of stuff going on to talk about, and we still want to have this be like the show that we want it to be, where we have our regular schmegular topics, is the way that I would think about it. As far as what I wanted to spend my portion of today's episode on, my little tinier portion, is I wanted to go looking back at last time, doing a little bit of follow-up, correcting some stuff, following up on things that have happened since we discussed that nice hour-long or so presentation about the Switch 2. And I think the big one that has to open this, because it was the discussion everywhere, was the price. And I know we talked about the belief was that the $449 price point factored in tariffs, and that turns out to be wrong. That was
But it will now.
Oh, well, actually, it's interesting that you bring that up, because we did actually this morning get an update, which is we finally got in the U.S. a pre-order opening date. Other nations in the world have been able to pre-order for a little bit, but because of this certain little bit of chaos, we haven't been able to. So if you're someone who's been just chomping at the bit to do this, you now have a date when these go live, which is next Thursday, April 24th. Of course, who knows if this will be out by then, based on my editing. Console price is still the same.
Okay.
Games that are announced so far are still the same. Didn't say anything about, the only two that they cited were Mario Kart and Donkey Kong. I can't think of why any digital releases, to the extent there are any, would need to go up in price, but that's good. The things that are going up in price, however, are accessories. And I think, because really the problem is, there's really no good situation here, right? They're torn between, we have a fiduciary responsibility to continue making a profit, and a bigger profit. People want lower prices, and they certainly don't want to see the price of the console or the games go up. And we also don't want to keep losing money on tariffs. So I think no matter what, it was going to be a sucky situation and no one was going to like it. But I think of all the options they had, bumping the price up a little bit on the accessories was the best call that they could have done. Everything except for the dock is going up by $5. So, and the strap, and this can't possibly be right if it's everything. This can't possibly be right if everything's got a $5 increase, because it also shows the Pro controller getting a $10 increase. So either that's wrong in this article or it is getting a $10. So, but yeah, most things on here are just going up $5, which sucks. The straps, if you're one of those people who uses the straps, you're going to have to pay $1 more for those, though. Anyway, go ahead and comment.
I mean, my thought is that it was kind of inevitable, prior to all this. So, when we got, this initial Switch news, I was already kind of, raising an eyebrow, because, how we discussed is the 450 going to be in addition to what was going on at the time? And now we know that it isn't that, but at least the console is staying at the same price, which at least I can credit Nintendo for that. Is it a little pricier than it probably should be? Maybe. Who knows if that was like an already predetermined thing prior to all this happening, but at the end of the day, I think like the accessories going up a little bit, I can live with, but like do not expect to be pushing those like at launch. You will
No.
probably have to like have some level of sale maybe 6 months out, like when we get closer to like Black Friday, Christmas, and then you'll see a bump. But you have to realize that the gravity of the situation in the world right now, like taking it out of just the scope of video games for a second,
Mm-hmm.
it's very uncertain, is the nicest way to put it. The constant back and forth, the hot and cold of who's getting tariffed, who's not getting tariffed, and seeming like hourly in some cases that it's being decided. I think until there is a much more concrete plan across the board, and I'm crossing everybody across the world, be very, very consumer conscious. Like, if you can buy it and if you can live with, how much it's currently at, cool, go for it. I am going to be on the side for once, and this is very unlike me, be fiscally responsible until things either calm down or until things are a little bit clearer. Because I think that is going to be the biggest indicator of how well the Switch 2 is going to do. So for me, I hope that we can get it at launch, like, because that does happen around my birthday, which would be a great birthday present for myself. I do want to hit on the point too. I think digital is fine in terms of prices. I don't think it's going to affect the physical situation as drastically as we may make it out to be, mostly because it's already at 90 and people are already complaining about it. If Nintendo is already going to be like, oh, we have to bump it up like another $5, you are not pushing games physically, even for the physical market. Those things will skyrocket in price because you could. And I really hope they are aware of situations like when $60 is the sale price, people are going to notice. Which is why I think, like, realistically, maybe once this whole thing kind of dies down a little bit with, like, the will we won't we get tariffed across the world, I think that's going to be the best indicator of what Nintendo might do. Because I believe we talked about this last time, that it could end up being kind of like a 3DS situation where they're too pricey to afford, so Nintendo decides to just take the hit so they can push units.
Yeah, I mean that comes down to like, because I think when people think about that happening, they're kind of in their brains thinking it's going to be like what they've talked about, where it's almost like a boycott. It's not going
Mm-hmm.
to be because of a boycott. It's going to be because, like you said, it's too pricey. Like it's almost like a natural boycott in a sense, right? Where it's like people aren't buying it because they're just like, I can't afford it, or they're just looking at it and they're like, that's too much, whether or not they're making a stink about it, right?
Yeah.
When we're just talking about like at Christmas time. I mean, I don't think this would happen all across the board at Christmas time, but like for some kids at Christmas, they're like, Mom, I want a Switch 2 for Christmas. And then she sees it and she goes, $450? Like, she's not making a stink about that on the internet necessarily, but she's still part of that group by extension. And that's more when the judgment goes into like, okay, well, we got to push
Yeah.
units. We got to sell this thing, especially now when it's your only system as opposed to back then when they still had for another year going the Wii and then going into the Wii U. So, like, now's a little bit more, they've even got a little bit more incentive to do
I
this.
I feel like I'm going to be bold and make a prediction here once we get closer to the holiday season. You feel free to quote me on this in 6 months or whatever it'll be. I think what's going to happen is once we get into the holiday season, Black Friday through Christmas, like that whole time frame, so like that month and a half ish, like sales and stuff like that. I believe what we're going to see is Switch 2 is going to drop to a minimum of $400 during the holiday season. I could even be as bold and say it could go as low as 350. I don't know if that's for sure going to happen. There are going to be a lot of external variables before that, but I could see in a normal circumstance, like without, what's going on in the world economically, I would see them being able to drop it down $100 at Christmas and be like seeing those units fly. I think if they're smart, they need to look at it as like, yeah, if you want the Switch 2 at launch, that's not going to be the biggest pusher of units. It's going to be the 2025 holiday season. And I will say that even as far as with the games, I could see them dropping another at least 10, 15, maybe even $20 dependent on what is available at that time. I don't think we're going to see anything lower than 60 for those games, at least out of the new Switch 2 stuff. But I do believe that we will be seeing a drastic change in price from June to like November, December.
Yeah, I mean,
legitimately, yeah,
it's tough to say.
I know it's tough to say right now, with given like everything going on. I feel though if Nintendo is gonna play it smart, and I say that it was a very loose word, who has no full understanding of the intricacies of business, I could see that like even a $50 drop in the console is going to push more units because people are going to pay 400 over 450. In the same way that if it's, take a $80-$90 game, but you suddenly see it's like 60-70, those will push too. I would say like kind of be prepared if there's some hesitancy at the beginning, but be more prepared for when the holiday season hits, because that is where they're going to make the most money. They will still have some level of profit margins, I think, but at the end of the day, that will be the bigger moneymaker, because there's going to be a lot more people willing to spend when they start seeing the number go down, even if it's only a temporary sale. That's the biggest thing. Everyone is the same way when it comes to shopping. Lower number means I'm paying for it now. The best way I can describe it is like, imagine Steam sale, and you're on your wish list and you see all these games that you want. Let's say we're going to go into the summer Steam sale here in a couple months. Somebody is going to look at their wish list and start seeing a lot of those games they wanted, those $60 games that they were looking at getting but didn't have the money for right now. They could drop heavily, like minimum even like $50, or not $50, excuse me, 50%. And then there's even more where it's like, the cheaper games, like the $30 ones, you're seeing for like $5. People go feral on sales when it is something they desperately want. They will watch it like a hawk if they truly desperately want it. I think that is going to be the case for a lot of like just gaming people individual. I think that's going to be a lot of families looking to like get their kids one for Christmas. And I think that's going to be the biggest moneymaker is this summer, or not this summer, excuse me, this winter, this like Christmas season will make Nintendo possibly the most money that they have ever made in that time period. Even maybe that quarter, just from the sake of it's a new system with new games and a reduced price, but it's because it's more overall. At that point, you were just looking to push units, and that will still push you over the edge of what you're aiming for. Maybe you don't hit exactly what your like numbers are aiming for, but you're better off being able to provide that for the consumers, and now you are in a much better good faith standing because of it. That's my take on it. By all means, I will very well probably be wrong, but if I'm not wrong, I'm not going to gloat about it. I'm just going to be like, great, Nintendo did something right.
Listeners, when quarter 4 financials come out at the start of next year, tune in and we'll have to verify this claim.
Quarter 4 or quarter 1?
Well, it should be quarter 4 because it'd be the end of the year, right?
Well,
I don't know. Either way, whatever the holiday quarter is.
Yeah, because I don't remember if that's quarter 1 or not, because like, at least when I was working at one job, we stopped our yearly like end bonus thing. Like it would stop keeping track in September. We would get it in December, but I think the financial year starts actually like at or close to that holiday season first.
That's true. It might depend on the business.
Yeah, so it might be more of the quarter 1 statistics for that financial year, but either way, I hope for the love of God that we will see at least some level of price drop in the future. And I'm sure when we get to that point, Brandon and I will definitely be looking into that and kind of seeing like, were we right? Were we wrong? What kind of things kind of surprised us? Like, there will be things that will be happening around Christmas. No questions asked. It
Well,
always is.
well, right, for sure. Something will happen. I don't know. I'm not fully convinced that your option is going to be right because thinking about the past, like when they done, for years it's been you get a console with a Mario Kart 8 and you get a few months of Switch Online, but it's the same
Mhm.
price as if you just bought the system. So it's like it's kind of up in the air. Who knows? They're still 8 months out till Christmas, so we'll just have to wait and see. I should add, in the interest of fairness, there were also some price hikes on PlayStation 5 systems in Europe and in Australia. PS5 Pro staying its current price, but we are having the digital only PS5 and the standard PS5 with the disc drive go up in price as well across different European nations as well. But if you just like, let's say you bought the digital PS5 and you want your like later down the line, you're like, I want a disc drive. The disc drive will cost a little bit less. So there are also price hikes and changes going on with other systems right now. So this isn't just here, but given that this is the new thing, the Switch 2 is the talk of the town. As far as other price stuff, we do have more definite American prices for the edition games, as well as their upgrade packs. So if you're looking for some reason to get the Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom upgrades, those will be $10 specifically for the upgrades. So, but if you're getting them like standalone, it's just again the same price as the original game, but $10 added onto it. So if you bought Breath of the Wild for $60. If you're getting the Switch 2 edition standalone, it's $70. But I figure most people will just be getting the upgrade pack. We're still waiting on confirmation for the bigger ones that like have content like Kirby, Mario Party. But assuming the Japanese games are going to be a good analog, it should be $20 upgrades. And we also did get confirmation that like the Switch 2 editions are like their own cartridges. They're not like, oh, it's the game and a download of the upgrade. But I will say there is consternation specifically with the Breath of the Wild one too, because it doesn't come with the DLC. Why don't I get your take on this before I give mine? Because I know that was something that upset a lot of people.
I think that people need to understand that like DLC is not attached to the main game unless it is something that you were able to make, like in a case of like a remastered. Like best example I can think of right now, Last of Us on PS4 when that came out. It came with the Left Behind DLC because that was how they purposed it when they were making it for the PS4. It was a free add-on, and it will always come down to what the companies decide that they're going to do. I don't think in the case of Nintendo, it's like, oh, this is, piracy or whatever it is. They're saying, did you buy the DLC? And if you said no, then why would they be giving you that? Like, unless they specifically had, like, Breath of the Wild remastered or complete edition or whatever you want to call it. It is just Breath of the Wild. It is just Tears of the Kingdom, and all these other ones. I am assuming Pokemon will be in the same vein. They will not have the DLC for those attached to them.
Well,
I think
the good thing, like I assume you're talking about Scarlet and Violet when you say that, right?
yes,
Well, the good
yeah,
thing with those is there is a list of some games where it's just like they're just getting free upgrades. So whereas these are like the more like the bigger, we're definitely making them 4K. Whereas I think those are like it's just going to take advantage of the better hardware, but they're not like increasing the resolution and all that stuff.
I think the big thing with it too is that like Scarlet and Violet was so not well received at launch that like having that one be free is the best case that they could have done. Even if you're not giving them the DLC, you are giving them a free upgrade essentially. This is like a massive patch effectively to fix a lot of the problems when it was on Switch. And it gives us incentive to not, just get rid of it willy nilly. And I also think too, and this is maybe I'm in the minority on this, I don't know. I think that it is justifiable now to focus more on getting Switch games used because of it. Because the cartridges don't wear out the same way as like, N64 cartridges or GameCube discs or Wii discs or anything like that as much. It's not saying they won't wear out, but being able to get a Switch game that is going to get an upgrade for effectively, let's say you get like I don't know. I'm using this as a hypothetical. Let's say you get Scarlet for $30. You got it pre-owned. You don't own the DLC, and you're getting the upgrade for free. You are still paying less than it was at launch, and you're going to get a quote unquote better version of the game in response of it. So I think Nintendo is completely in their right to a degree on what games they decide they give free updates and which ones that they're going to add a little extra for because of XYZ. The Breath of the Wild and the Tears of the Kingdom one can be kind of debatable, I know, but those are also two of their biggest moneymakers from that console. You will not convince them otherwise. The fact that people got lucky that Scarlet and Violet got a free update, considering it is, I believe, the most successful selling Pokemon of all time, I think, if I remember right. I might be wrong on that.
Did it beat Red and Blue? Like, Red and Blue were the top-selling Pokemons forever.
Let's take a gander on the internet. They wouldn't lie to us on the internet.
Anyway, so while you're doing that, I'm going to give my take on it. I'm surprised. You're a little bit nicer on this than I was going to be, because I see what you're saying. And I'm mixed on it because, on the one hand, I can't be in favor of the standalone game not coming with the DLC, because, I mean, it's effectively a definitive edition, right? I think in practice, it's basically the same thing as kind of what you're saying, where it's like remastered, because you are getting like the big texture upgrades, you are getting the big frame upgrades in places where the game slowed down badly. So, you know, in that sense, it's like, in principle, I can't agree with this. The one way that I'm mixed, though, is we also have to remember Breath of the Wild was only the fourth best-selling Switch 1 game. It sold 33 million units. And so that means there's going to be a lot of people also among that chunk of owners of the game that also have the DLC. So they've already, if they bought the game at launch and they bought the DLC at launch, they already sank $80 into this. So, like, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like, in practice, I don't think this is going to be that big a deal, but I completely agree with you. If I were advising someone, hey, should I get the Switch 2 edition or should I get the original and the upgrade? I would tell them, yeah, get the original. And like you said, used especially is a great point, because I was just looking at one of my favorite websites on the internet, good old pricecharting.com. And according to them, Breath of the Wild on Switch goes for like $30, loose or complete. Like, you can find eBay listings for it like that right now all the time. Now, by the time the Switch 2 comes out and people realize this, I do expect that that will start going up in price, start trending upward. And of course, if you like go to like a GameStop, I guarantee it'll be sitting there for $54.99. But by and large, you should be getting a better deal for the time being. And of course, if you already have the game, your options are either play it like it is now, or if you want the upgrade, go for the upgrade. I don't know that $10 in my mind is worth 4K and increased frame rate in some areas, but, you know, that's just me. Even if it is more, I would definitely be more interested in the games that have the DLC. Like, I'm kind of torn right now between, like, because I haven't bought it yet, do I want to go get a copy of the original Mario Party Jamboree, or do I want to wait for the Switch 2 edition to come out? I think I'm leaning toward going for the original and just getting the upgrade, but, you know, I mean, there might be something amusing to the idea of like, oh, I have an addition to the game, but, you know, it's also a mass-produced product, so it doesn't really matter. Did you get an answer to this question?
So I'm on VG charts right now, and I was able to find their numbers, and these are according to as of February of this year. So first, I'm wrong that Red and Blue and Green is still technically first place at 31.38 million. Do you want to guess what number 2 is?
It's either going to be a DS one, or it's going to be a Switch one. So I'm torn between, it's either going to be Black and White, or it's going to be Sword and Shield, are my guesses.
It is Sword and Shield.
All right. Well,
So Sword and Shield sold second place at 26.6 million as of February. And Scarlet and Violet is right behind it at 26.38. So I was wrong, but I wasn't that far off either.
red and blue and green and yellow's crown is it's
No,
it's
no, not
almost been
even yellow.
taken. Oh no,
Not even
you're right.
yellow. Just red, green, and blue.
Oh.
The original games are still first. They put yellow in its own category, which is of another 14.64 million. If you want to get technical, then that's probably well over, let's see, 45 million, easy. Maybe 46 million. But like, I feel like if they're separating those because they were later release, then I'm going to count that as a different capacity. But I do get, like, a lot of people will probably clump the gens together. But like, I look at it from the perspective of like, that is surprising how much Scarlet and Violet went. Considering that the previous game with Legends Arceus was just under 15 million. It was at 14.83 million. It is the worst performing game on the Switch in terms of sales. Which is ironic because I would argue that is one of the best ones on the Switch, but that's just me.
All right. Well, yeah, that kind of surprises me too. I'm guessing something about the fact that it's technically not a mainline game. Plus, considering, we're talking Scarlet and Violet, so those are two games, you have to combine their sales together, whereas Legends Arceus is one game. So
Which is true.
it could have been higher if there was like Legends Arceus and Legends, I don't know, Mewtwo, some other godlike Pokemon or whatever, being the other version. So
I think the thing that I'm most surprised by personally is that both the Gen 4 remakes on Switch and Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee both beat Arceus, which is a very shocking number to me. Like, it's not by much, but it's still a lot. And then if you want to get technical, the worst performing of all time is Crystal, which is only at 6.39 million. Yeah.
That's a beloved game, too.
Well, right. And I think the thing is that we're going off of them splitting the generations. Like, Ruby and Sapphire splits up with Emerald, so those are two sets of numbers. Platinum is separated from the Gen 4 games. Black and White 2 are both split up. And it kind of keeps going down from there. It's not saying that they sold poorly. I think that because there's a massive difference in time when you have that generation, like when Gold and Silver came out, that was 23.10 million for reference. So another 6.39 million still puts them at close to 30 million units for Gen 2 alone. But then you also kind of have to raise into this question of, if you're clumping all the games together by generation, where do you kind of cut it off? Because then Gen 3 would get also Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, but also get Fire Red and Leaf Green, because that is technically a Gen 3 version of a Gen 1 game.
Yeah, Pokemon's always been kind of a hard game to categorize the sales of for this exact reason.
Right, and I think that the way they do it on this chart is about the fairest way that we're going to go about it, because it's essentially the same game twice for a lot of these versions in, so to speak, ways, but it's because their whole gimmick is you have to trade with your friends across different games in order to catch them all, ideally. So putting them at least paired together makes sense, in my eyes at least. But still, some of these numbers are still astonishing, that it's like Crystal is the worst performing one overall, which is shocking because I know a lot of people weren't the biggest fans at the top of things like, Black and White 2, or not Black and White 2, but like Black and White, or even Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were kind of hit or miss for a lot of people. Like, the closest one that was like where the originals and then the follow-up game for that generation came out of is probably, let's see here, Black and White's pretty close, and then probably Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon is probably the next closest. Because Black and White sold 15.64 million, Black and White 2 were 8.5 million, and then Sun and Moon was 16.33 million compared to 9.23 million in the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So I think there is something to be said in those numbers a little bit. And I didn't mean for this to get kind of on the topic, but I I think there is kind of this noticeable thing where if you're a true fan who bought the original generation and then bought the follow up, I think that's where the majority of that base is. So like, everyone's playing Sun and Moon, but then the people who, are really diehard devoted, that 9.23 million followed up with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, while, say about 7 million of people didn't follow up on it because they just didn't like how it was, or maybe they just couldn't afford it, or whatever the reason is.
Well, right.
But it really
or on that point
that.
of not being able to afford it, it's like they're just like, well, I can just keep playing the original and I'm fine.
Oh, right. And, like, that's kind of a shocking thing. But also kind of factor in, too, is, like, I think there's a massive difference in, like, methodology, I think, when it came to how much got sold. Because, like, you factor in, like, Pokemon Red, Green, and Blue, they were probably banking on a lot of people buying that. But also that's factoring 3 games compared to just 2, like, normal. Because that is counting the Japan exclusive Green in that set of numbers, too. But...
Yeah, I don't know. That one's a little bit weirder. It's still, you're right to categorize because green is Japan only. I mean, because because the green version is the same as our blue version, and then Japan got its own blue version as well. So, the joy of game history, right? Anyway,
right.
So we've passed about the 30-minute mark. So I think. Do you want to move on to our main topic today?
Sure, we can talk about what I want to talk about.
Well, give us an introduction, and then we can decide who between the two of us will be discussing first.
So I raised this question to you earlier in the week when we were trying to figure out a topic, and I had recently just finished a game that kind of led into my thought process with this topic. And I wanted to talk about games that are like beloved or well reviewed or well received that we didn't like as much as others.
So the classic, like, a lot of people did top 10s on this back in the day. The top 10 games I didn't like, but everyone else does. That kind of idea.
Yeah, but we won't go down that rabbit hole of 10. I mean, if we ever start doing like short, and I will say this full chest, short form content for YouTube, which is for us like 16 minutes, but it'd be probably fun to actually make a full top 10 list at some point down the road, but I think that's a down the road thing until we start to really, find the footing here. But I wanted to talk about a few games that I had personally gone through these like things. And previously I had talked about the first one that I'm going to bring up very positively. And I will tell you that, like, as much as I was enjoying it overall, I definitely don't feel like I'm as strong of a fan after finishing it. And that's Pacific Drive. So Pacific Drive, and I'm going to make some quick notes and we'll go a little bit into it. I think the concept of it is great. It's a sci-fi road trip that's based essentially in the 90s. Great premise, just in general. When you're first starting out the game, it's really good. The characters are really interesting that you have these conversations with, and I use that kind of loosely because they're the ones that are more just talking over you while you stay completely silent. Silent protagonist things. I think the car maintenance thing is really fun when you're first learning it because it's it actually puts you in this position of it's not just you upgrading the car and then that's it. You're just becoming this overburdened, overpowered thing that's going to stop this radioactive wasteland that has become the Pacific Northwest. But it actually forces you to actually pay attention to the car, as you're driving. If you get a flat tire, if it goes loose, if your windows break, if things steal literally parts off of your car, including doors and panels and even attachments that you get.
They really make you fix all that?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's not everything all going on at once. It's as things kind of progress, because some of it will break during the trip. So you'll have to prepare in advance with these kits so you can get sealing kits for your tires so they don't go flat anymore. Mechanic kits so that if it goes loose, it's fine. They have like a workbench area that you can actually have in your trunk that will let you craft items and parts if necessary to put those back on if necessary. Like, because like the car is effectively your protection against this radiation, which is the whole point of why you have to be very adamant on how you're keeping up with it. And it forces you to really be aware of your surroundings because you want to try to save as many resources without having to go and make parts over and over again. And like as you go back to this like central hub area that they have, which is effectively this auto garage that you can actually upgrade, there are things that as you upgrade it will make those leagues easier. Like there's a machine that will literally, if you put a part that is still damaged, like if it's taken damage or something, you can shove it in there, and then on your next trip, it will be completely fixed. With certain exceptions, because certain ones have like there's like different types of like status effects. Like there's ones like fragile, which can't necessarily be fixed, so it's more on like it's on borrowed time. So like it will break eventually, whether you've been fixing it more or less or not. But like you just have to kind of be fully aware of everything going on with the car, and it even goes as far as like you will actually have to figure out what's wrong with your car because of what are called quirks, where doing one thing in your car will cause something else to happen in the car that it shouldn't be doing. So, for example, there's one that I remember very vividly I got quite often, which was if I turned my steering wheel all the way to either the left or the right, it made my headlights dim.
What? Why?
Remember, this is a radioactive wasteland, so I think that was kind of like the reasoning behind it is like your car's going to get weird because it's in this very radiated
Okay,
weird
I
world.
guess. To me,
Remember,
this just sounds like car maintenance, the game, but also like you don't want to die of radiation poisoning. So
yeah,
far,
but like you're so here's the thing is that, and I know this is like the first game that I said that I didn't care as much as others. I do want to preface this like I do genuinely like this game. Like I just don't think it's as highly rated because I was seeing it getting rated 9 out of 10s across the board almost with all these publications. And it's really really hard to suggest it for somebody. Cuz here's the thing, if you want to like have a road trip game, it definitely fits that bill. If you want to have something that's like a resource gathering game, definitely that. But I think the problem kind of stems from is the monotony that it can kind of lead to. For me personally, I was more at least invested in the story, so I was able to kind of get from point A to point B to be able to make those story beats hit at least. But kind of what you were saying just now is that the constant car problems can really make the experience of the game drag after a certain point because it's like now you just feel like you're fixing it over and over and over and over, and it's for the most mundane stuff too, or the weirdest possible things that you can do. And even like upgrades, like when it comes to the car or upgrades to the shop, can feel a little bit like they're a slog at times because it's like there's certain things that you need to get in order to get those upgrades, whether it's access to certain kits or certain parts that you can create or things in the shop that will make things leagues easier for you down the road. Like early on, you get like these lockers that you can like put away stuff that you gathered from the thing, but they're limited because there's only so much that they can actually fit. At a point, you can actually access pneumatic lockers, which effectively are endless, is basically the way to describe it. So it completely gets rid of, oh, my locker space is now full. No, you just have these and just shove everything in it. It's essentially a magic bag of holding, but a metal locker. But like the slog of trying to gather things, like I couldn't force myself to 100% of this game. I really wanted to. I just couldn't because I was starting to get that burnout of like I'm taking the car constantly, removing parts and putting on new parts, and then things are breaking or things will break that I can't fix fully. So I just scrap that and put in new parts. And the gameplay loop can be a lot. And that's where I think I started to really lose a lot of like steam with it. Like I forced myself to finish it, and I'm glad I did because the story was fantastic, and I actually kind of teared up a little bit at certain parts with some of the characters. But like, I loved exploring the world because it was so vast. Despite like you're kind of in like how they handle the map is effectively like it's a big road map, and then there's sections across the board, but the sections are randomly generated. So you may not run into the same type of map or the same layout twice in your playthrough. But the amount of prep time sometimes that it would take also to kind of get ready in those cases could also be kind of a drag too. So I will say that like it is a good game. I will not bash it for what it's trying to do, but it is really hard for me to suggest it to a casual audience, especially because I really don't want to sit there and be like, "Oh, you have to play this. You have to experience it." I think that much is at least cool and really awesome. But you can watch that on YouTube. It's really hard to push that envelope to say like absolutely pay for it. If you get it cheap enough on Steam, try it out. Definitely worth the money because I think I paid for it like $20 for it. I don't regret that. But I am definitely like that is like the first big one, and this is kind of the whole reason I thought of this list in the first place for me was it's really hard to see the 9 out of 10 in the game. It's definitely a minimum 7 though in my eyes, maybe 8. But I think it's kind of been blown out of grandiose in some capacity because like until you are sitting there and you're like 50 hours in and you're still not done with the game, and maybe that's just how I was playing it, I could be wrong, you're going to have a lot to worry about and deal with that game. So that was my take on Pacific Drive.
Do you think it's going to be one of those cult classic games where it really speaks to some people and it's really going to be their thing, but, it's just not going to hit as big across the board? Or do you think it is that popular, but then you're going to get more people who are like, oh, this doesn't work for me, kind of like how it did for you?
I think it's going to be a cult classic indie game like a lot of current indie games are. Because, like, indie games, I think, in general, tend to end up hitting that cult classic status pretty easily. Because there are certain games that, like, don't have to worry about that. Games like Hades, for example, really push past that threshold that it became a household name for a lot of people. Pacific Drive is definitely going to have a cult following and definitely will have a lot of fans that can defend it better than I ever will. But I think it's one of those, like, it may kind of fall into obscurity until some YouTuber in, like, 3 years brings it up again, and they're like, oh, yeah, that was a good game.
I really did enjoy that one.
Right, exactly. And like I said, Pacific Drive, if you can get it cheap enough, absolutely give it a shot. Like, even if you don't finish it, the idea behind the game is just really fun to experience.
Well, at least you still ended up having a good time with it, right? Like, you're not going to end up loving every game, but,
Yeah.
it is what it is, right?
Right. Did we want me to go down my other two games that I was going to pick, or do we want to do one and one?
Yeah, why don't we do one and one, so that way, like, we definitely, like, I'm not saying you're going to ramble on and on forever. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But, like, I just want to make sure we definitely get a few of our games in for
Right.
each other,
Yeah, I think the game is just not the game, but like the idea is we hit at least 3 each. Because like if we end up like liking this idea, we could always revisit this too with some other options that we talked about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got a lot of options I could put on a list like this. So this could definitely be one of those evergreen topics, I think.
Oh yeah, and then on the flip side, we could always do games that people don't like that we ended up liking. I think that would also be very valid. Let us know.
I agree.
If you guys are interested. Maybe we'll do that as a near future episode.
Perhaps. But why don't we go over my first game for this? And I'm going to go with the great Ace Attorney Chronicles as a game that I think a lot of people... See, here's the thing. It's one of those games that a lot of people who like Ace Attorney really like it. It's not like a hugely, massively popular game in the first place, but the people who like the series really like the game. And I remember sometime, might have been a few months ago, might have been a year ago at this point, seeing a post somewhere on the internet where the user asked, like, what would an Ace Attorney game be like if it had 10 cases? Like, would you like that? And I can't remember if I responded to it, but if I had, I would have said that it's the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, because to me, that's what it is. And to me, that's pretty much the big problem with the game. It's kind of, in that sense, the anti-Ghost Trick. Because, when we talked about Ghost Trick, one of the big things that we liked about it was that it's a very satisfying story, but it takes place in one night. It's very short. It says what it needs to say. You're not like, it doesn't drag itself out. Chronicles, I think, is the opposite. With every Ace Attorney game, once you get to case 5, I feel like you've hit a satisfying conclusion. Even when you're talking, about the games where it's like you could see a little bit more coming from this, like there's stuff that's not like there's still questions. They're like overarching questions. They're not like you have questions or like desire to get more out of the game. There's one game, though, where I did not feel that, and that was with the first half of Chronicles, the Great Ace Attorney Adventures. Now, I don't know, how far are you into the game? I don't want to ruin it for you, necessarily.
I am at currently, I finished the second case, but I've been very off on it recently. It's not saying like I don't enjoy it, it's I keep having the same problem of I'll start a game, I'll get into it, and then all of a sudden I'm bouncing between like two different things. That was kind of the same thing I was struggling on Pacific Drive with, where I would be bouncing between like 2 or 3 games. And I really think it's like I'm trying to actively force myself. Like I do plan to get back into that pretty soon, hopefully. But then I started Schedule 1 recently, and now I'm doing that. So God knows when I'm going to actually go back to Ace Attorney. But I mean, so far, like I've only done the first 2 cases. I do genuinely like what it's bringing to the Ace Attorney table as a fan of the series, at least so far. I do love the whole Herlock Sholmes and all that stuff. I think the second case kind of knocked the wind out of my sails a little bit, given who died and is one of my favorite characters. And on top of it, the ending of it and like what was all revealed about it, I kind of sat there and I'm like, really? I'm like, all right, it's Ace Attorney, so I can't judge it that harshly because there are some absolutely absurd plot lines in that franchise. But I will eventually have to go back to that, and maybe we'll revisit this more in depth when I finish it properly. Because are you talking about like the Chronicles? Are you talking about the whole game with like 1 and 2, or are you talking about 1 or 2 specifically?
Well, I'm choosing to judge it as this whole package because that's how it was released to us here.
Okay.
If we got the original 3DS versions, I think in this case I would be more critical in particular of just adventures. But for the purposes of this, I feel like it makes more sense to judge it as a package because that's how we got it. Which in some ways you could argue isn't necessarily fair to it, I suppose, because I should think about them as 2 separate games. And really, I really think Adventures drags it down because when you get to the end of it, in my opinion, it doesn't feel like clearly a lot's happened. Ryunosuke was accused of murder. He stows away overseas. He ends up overseas. His best friend is dead. I'm sorry if I'm spoiling things for anyone here, but like these are all things that you've seen so far. But like then you get to the end of it and it's like, to me, it feels like things just still haven't really necessarily started by the time you've gotten overseas. Like there's still just plenty of stuff that still like needs to happen. So in that sense, I think it doesn't get to the payoff part of it. It's a lot of setup without any of the payoff, and all the payoff happens in Resolve, and that's a shame because in the one sense that makes Resolve a very satisfying sequel because it's like you're seeing all these things that followed up that you wanted to see happen, but it's like I would have liked a couple more of those things to be put in Adventures instead, because that would make that game feel more satisfying. And to me, it's a real shame because there's a lot of other great parts of the game. It looks great, maybe a little simplistic in some ways, like they'll do they have like pre-made shadows under like chins, for example, but like I don't think that's the end of the world. Music's great.
It kind of gives almost a comic booky feeling, which I can appreciate as someone who loves the Borderlands franchise. Like I like cell shading, and I think there is also this misnomer of like simple is equating to bad.
True,
because
true.
Of, like, the whole idea of like, oh, better graphics means better game, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. You need to get over that. But I definitely understand that part of it too. But I think so far, like it's too early for me to make my own personal choice on if I like the game or not, in terms of both as an Ace Attorney fan and as someone playing this game for the first time. So, but I definitely see your points though.
Yeah, no, I mean I think we would have a great discussion when we get to the end of this, even though it's been a couple years since I played these games. But it's just, man, you need to pay off some of these ideas. You can't just set them up and leave them there for so long. Is really like my big issue. Because again, a bunch of the other stuff hits great.
I think the other thing too that like, from how it sounds, is it's like Ace Attorney Chronicles being only 2 games really has a hard time giving the payoffs comparatively to like the original trilogy, because I think like what was good about those was that those in a lot of cases were self-contained. So like you knew the full payoff was coming out at some point near the tail end. Like whether you didn't realize it or not. Like in the first Ace Attorney, for example, and I'm going to be massively spoiling something, so I'm apologizing in advance for those who haven't played the game from, what was it, 2001. But in the first game, Miles Edgeworth is framed for a murder in the middle of a lake on Christmas Day, and there's a throwaway line, or at least it comes off as a throwaway line, where we're getting part of his backstory of when he was in an elevator and his dad was shot and killed because they thought the guard did it. Like, if you just look at it from the surface, that seems like just, oh, this is Edgeworth's backstory. So what are we going to do with it? It's like, well, now we know what his character is like and why he's the way he is. And then we decide as Ace Attorney fans to pull the rug from under us and be like, surprise, this is actually a real important plot point to the very end of the game. And everyone just, so I think there has to be this like gradualness with some of them, and I think helping it being self-contained does help. Exceptions obviously occurring in certain aspects of the franchise. Like the trilogy has like one of the best overarching things that does not get talked about enough, I feel like, when it comes to the Ace Attorney franchise. But it's like there is essentially a background thing kind of similar to Edgeworth that does not get tied up until the 3rd game. And it's because we spent 2 games thinking, oh, this is just background info, we don't need to know that much. Until it happens in the like near the end of the 3rd game, everyone lost their minds when that happened, and that's why everyone loves the 3rd game so much in that franchise. Mm-hmm. So, I think what they tried to probably, how you were trying to sound it, it sounds like they were trying to do something similar in Chronicles and had better success in the 2nd game versus the 1st game, at least from what I'm gathering so far, as someone who still needs to get through both of them.
Well, I think this way of like setup and payoff is a great way of thinking about it, because it's like they'll talk about this thing that's like, okay, if you know how to like read and analyze a book at all, you'll be like, okay, that thing that they brought up is going to be a plot point later in some way. They don't just bring this up at all because they're not gonna follow up on it eventually, but it's like to the extent you get a follow up on it, it's like maybe a little tiny thing, and then it just goes back into the background again. And it's like I think a good comparison here, because like I'm trying to figure out something that I could do that's not like the biggest, most amazing reveal here, like for either type of person here, but like the one I'm thinking about, like in the classic series, I guess maybe modern series since this is in the past, but like I think about Misty Faye, right? Mm. Misty Faye, what we know about her in the first game is that she's Mia and Maya's mom and she's gone. We don't necessarily like that. That's enough. We don't need to know anything about her more than that necessarily. It'd be interesting if like we heard about like more about what happened to her, or like if she came back for some reason, but we don't need that, right?
Right, and like that's
But they
something that's
do
like
follow up on that, but you don't expect them to, right?
right, and I think that like that was kind of what I was referring to, where that becomes like the big twist at the end involving Misty Faye and what happens in that. Without going too in depth on it, it is by far one of the best plot twists in that game and final like moments, I think, in that franchise as a whole. I think that whole thing is fantastic from start to finish. Is Ace Attorney like absolutely bonkers at times? Yes. But if you can kind of forgive the absurdity and just go along with it for the ride, you will get probably one of the best stories you will hear in recent memory. Like anything post 2000s, I would argue.
Right. Well, in Trials and Tribulations in particular, you get a good follow up on plot points
That
in the
whole
first game and plot points in Justice for All that similarly were like, you don't really expect them to get followed up on, or it's like they don't really need to get followed up on. It's like it feels like already it's like, oh, I know what I need to know about this. But the fact that they do follow up on it and then they give an even bigger payoff with new elements introduced is huge. Whereas, like, again, in Adventures, it's like they'll set something up and it's very clear, like, okay, this is setting something up. When are we going to hit this? And it's like, if it gets set up in, like, because the way that I think about Chronicles in my mind is like, I almost think of Adventures as like cases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Resolve is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, like, but if you're setting up something in 4, I'd really ideally like it to maybe get followed up on at least with something significant in like 6. Instead, it's like it waits all the way until like 8 or 9, and it's like that's too long for me to be like thinking about this and be distracted with some other case that, even though sure it has some relevance, feels otherwise kind of like filler.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people prefer the trilogy, like the original trilogy for Ace Attorney, because it's very more self-contained in that. I don't know if they were planning to do a trilogy, but if they were, kudos to them.
The first game was written assuming that was going to be the only game, and then it sold well. And then once Justice for All was written, then it was assumed it was going to be Justice for All and Trials and Tribulations. So, to me, that's kind of the genius of it too. Is it's like there's still like pieces left, but you could be totally satisfied just knowing what you know about having played the first game and leave it there.
Yeah.
No, it's just a shame. Like, I really, really wanted to love that game because I was so excited. The morning when I saw that it was, like, announced that it was a thing, I was like, oh my god, it's finally happening. And then I played it, and I was like, man, I still liked it fine enough. And by the time I got to the end, I was glad I played it. But it's still, like, that first half for me really kind of drags it down.
Maybe that's something we'll have to do if we ever do more elaborate YouTube videos. We could always do a Ace Attorney retrospective series for both of us.
Perhaps.
That will be a different day thing.
Yeah, we could talk about that later.
Yeah.
What second game did you want to discuss here?
Well, because I had a few games, I thought I would have you pick the other two that are on my list because I want to know what ones seem like the ones that surprised you the most. Because I have a list here of 6 games. Pacific Drive was the big one that I wanted to bring up. But I have 5 others I can definitely talk about if we want. So if you want to pick what ones you want my thoughts on, I am more than willing to.
Seeing as I've heard you give positive takes on it before, I want to hear why Overcooked didn't stand with you as much as it did. It wasn't as positive to you before. Like, I mean, I think the reasoning that I see in the document here makes sense, like, but I want to hear it in your words, too.
Okay, so recently, Ash and I ended up finishing this fully. Like, we didn't do DLC or anything because I have the one for PS4. But we got the Duo one that has Overcooked 1 and 2. So we played through all of Overcooked 1. We really liked it. It was fun for the two of us. We beat the whole thing like within a week, I think, or something like that. And it was a fun time. We started playing the second game with our friend Nick. And It is just so much better. I I don't have like any hatred toward Overcooked. I don't want to make it sound like I'm thinking this is the worst thing ever. It's not. Overcooked has just things that hold it back because it's the first one in the series. And I put a thing specifically on here to give a better analogy on it. I've played through every Borderlands game through Borderlands 3. Playing Overcooked 1 from Overcooked 2 for me is the equivalent of what happens if you play Borderlands 1 after you finish Borderlands 3. You notice how like slow it is. You notice that it's pretty basic by comparison. I played through Borderlands 3 and I loved it because it was high octane, high action, and it was like so freedom moving. And then I went back to 1. I'm like, oh, I want to go play through the old games in the franchise. And 1 is such a slog because it was like there were no movement options. This was in the mid 2000s style of first person shooter, so like movement was not a consideration. It was all focused on the shooting and the storytelling of it. And I will absolutely give Borderlands 1 the credit it deserves. That's a whole other thing right now. But like that was how I felt playing 2 after playing 1, because 2 has all these things that are much better for it as a game compared to 1. So like I don't want to make it sound like don't play Overcooked 1. It's fun. You'll have a good time, especially if it's the first time you've played it. But if you're going to keep playing an Overcooked game, play 2. 2 has much more freedom. It's a lot more cleaner of a game in terms of like what it can do and what it does right. And 1 will kind of hold you back a smidge because of certain things that you want to do if you went from like Overcooked 2 to Overcooked 1 that aren't in that game. Like something as simple as throwing ingredients is such a godsend in 2 that if it was in 1, this would not be an issue. But if it was in 1, Overcooked 2 would just be DLC at that point. There would be no reason to sell a sequel. So Overcooked, like, I would still argue, is a great game. I just think that people need to play 2 more because that is the much more fluid game. That's the better version of that game that you should be playing. And I will hopefully be beating Overcooked 2 in the near future, but that is a down the road thing for me right now.
It kind of makes me think of like Mario Party 1 versus Mario Party 2, right?
Yes.
When you don't have to deal with like the single player minigames and the lack of items and just like there's certain intricacies and quirks about it that like make it kind of charming, but like Mario Party 2 just does Mario Party a lot better. That's kind of what I'm thinking this is like.
Yeah, it's exactly like that thought process. I think the thing is like if you want to get into a franchise, start from the beginning so you know kind of where you're going into moving forward. Don't work from the newest back. You will disappoint yourself every single time. It'd be like if, you're playing something like Super Mario Wonder and you end up going all the way back to the original Super Mario. You will be disappointed because it is not the same style of game. There has to be this evolution of progress in a lot of these series, and that's how we go from Super Mario Brothers to Super Mario Wonder, or Borderlands 1 to Borderlands 3, or all these other examples we could very well easily be.
Yeah, we could beat a dead horse with just examples like, hey, this game was way better than the one that was came before it, because that's how, hopefully improvement works.
Like, there are exceptions. I will be very blunt on that. I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head. But there are exceptions to the rule where, like, the later sequels do not do as well as the other games in the series. And that's fine. Like, I think Assassin's Creed is probably one of the better examples of that, where people say certain sequels don't hit as well as previous entries. That's fine. It's going to always come down to the player. But at least if you start from the beginning and kind of see where it's coming from, you know why people are like, wow, this sequel is really, really good. Or like, oh, wow, this is why this, I don't know why they made this change, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, start from the beginning. If you haven't played Overcooked, definitely play it, though. But play 1 first, don't play 2 until after you've beaten that one. You will never go back to Overcooked 1, more than likely.
Yeah, I also think it's one of those games where, because I tried it a little bit, but it was only in 2-player. I get the feeling I would enjoy it even more in that 3-4-player kind of setting. But,
100%.
like, your mileage may vary, as always. One of my favorite sayings.
And I think it just does better as a party game versus a game that you play by yourself. Like, you can play it by yourself, and it's fine. But certain games like Overcooked are, like, much better experiences the more people you get involved, because then you have people that are, like, there to be like, hey, this is why you like this is why this is fun. And it's like, even if you just play Overcooked 1 with 4 people, I think would be leagues more fun than playing a game by yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I like a good multiplayer game. I like a good single player game too, but like,
Oh yeah.
it's nice to get those people in the same room with you too.
All right. You're number 2.
I'm going to go, this is a little bit more of a broader one. I guess I have to admit I failed a little bit in this because I guess between Chronicles technically being 2 games and this sort of being multiple games in a sense, I didn't pick just a game, but just these all kind of go together. And it's with post Breath of the Wild Zelda for the most part. Because a lot of my feelings towards Zelda, when I think about it, once we get to Breath of the Wild and onward, are just like, they're a circumstance of like, I am intimidated by gigantic open world games. And I'm intimidated by crafting too, in a sense. Like, I just want to be given a tool. I want to use it. I don't have to figure out what to make. I just want to get it and keep moving on. In the same kind of way, with an open world, it's like, I don't want something where, like, I was looking this up because I was curious, where it takes like 30 minutes to walk from like one far end of the map to the other if I need to. Granted, I mean, I know there's fast travel along the way. I'm not saying you're ever going to necessarily be in that scenario, but just, I'm just using that to talk about, like, that's kind of the scale and the scope of the map, and it's just so much. I want games with reasonable limitations, where it's like, we're not just making something big and ballooning it way up just because we can. And I'm not saying that's what they do necessarily. I haven't played enough of them to get like better judgments on them, but I just, I get so scared by them. I'm scared. I don't want to play it.
I think for me too, it's like I prefer the linear more Zelda games. Like, I didn't think Breath of the Wild was bad by any stretch. It's definitely up there, like top 5 easy for me. But like, Twilight Princess is my all-time favorite game just in general. And I love the pacing of it. I love that it's a semi-open world where it doesn't feel like I'm so overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, I gotta go from here to here. It gives me clear incentive to go to a certain place to keep progressing it all forward and whatnot. And Breath of the Wild, it's like, yeah, it has that, but it's like the scope of it is so much bigger that you almost can kind of get punished if you're not prepared. And I don't always like that game. You'll notice a trend here because I said the same thing about Pacific Drive. Preparation sometimes is the only way you are going to get through in certain cases. And I think Breath of the Wild does have those moments as well. Where, like, yeah, you want to explore, but the second you find a guardian alive, you are suddenly panicking, going, okay, I can't swear, but you get what I'm thinking right now.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. You're just it's a victim. You become a victim of circumstance in this case, where it's just like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be there. Well, guess I'm screwed.
Yeah, or it's like, it's kind of the equivalent of like if you're walking down the street and there's a piano that fell out of the sky because you didn't know it was rolling out a window or something.
Mm-hmm. I think another part of it too for me is like something people really laud about these games, whether it's Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and Echoes of Wisdom. Now, Echoes of Wisdom is in a little bit of its own category. I'm going to touch on that hopefully in a second here. But it's like one of the things people love about it is like, oh, there's so many different ways to like figure out how to do this. And I'm torn on that idea because that's true. And I think there's an extent to which it's like you're awarding creativity. But at the same time, I also start then thinking about like, well, but then you're also maybe awarding some genericness in your puzzle design, right? It's like you're letting the player be the creative one, but you have to make something that's really, really broad here instead of something that's really, really clever necessarily. That's also not to say there aren't clever things that happen in that game. Things that you're like you might not be thinking about, but they make sense when you like put it together.
So can I make an argument to what you're pointing out here?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I definitely hear what you're saying on that whole front, so I'm not gonna like try to say like, oh, you're wrong or whatever. But you're familiar with math, right?
Yes, I am familiar with math.
Okay, so good. You're gonna get this analogy pretty easily then. So my thought is like when it comes to something like that, it kind of equates to a math problem. Let's say that there is an answer. So let's say for Echoes of Wisdom, you have to get from this point on the map to this point on the map and get through that door. And you don't know specifically what stuff you can and can't do offhand. In the same way as a math problem, let's say that something is, the answer is 36, right? Well, how are you getting there? That's kind of where my thought process is. It's like, the answer is still the same, but if you tell me I'm going to do 18 plus 18 versus I'm going to do, 20 plus 16 or 12 times 3 or whatever it is, those are all technically the right answer because they're all 36. So in that idea of like, oh, it's, being too much of it, it's like, yeah, but it's fun to see kind of like how they get to it. You know what I mean?
Well, but I could make a counterpoint using your same kind of argument, because in math, a lot of the time it was show your work, because you do want to get to the right answer on your test, but your teacher wants to see that you got to it and used like the way you're supposed to do it correctly. That it isn't like that it's like, well, I know the answer is this because like that's how you get there, but I use some totally other backwards method to get there. It's supposed to be showing you this. You're supposed to be showing like I have mastered this skill. Now, sure, obviously this is not an apples to apples comparison. Clearly, like these don't completely work the same way, because in a game like this, yeah, of course you can find multiple ways to get to the same conclusion. But I'm just saying, like, for me, it's just a lot of like, maybe I'm going to become too reliant on this one way of doing things, but then they're going to want me to go this other way, and I haven't had to learn how to do it because I haven't been like given this tool, for a while, or like had opportunities where it's clear like this is the way that it needs to be done. I don't know. To be fair, I think a lot of these things I might be coming up with are hypotheticals. It's just a lot of like, I'm scared kind of stuff,
All right, I'm going to tab 5 and play counterpoint here on this one, on your counterpoint. Let me kind of take a different example with this whole math analogy that I'm going with. Say that you are given a massive amount of something. Let's say that you are that asshole who bought 100 apples from the store that they yell at us in the math textbooks when we were younger. So let's say that we do not know how many apples there are, just to point blank it. And there's 3 people that all have the same amount of apples each in front of them. And all they say is, all right, count them. One person could do it one by one by one by one, still get to the answer that they're doing. Somebody might split them up into groups, and they will see how many that they made evenly and see what is left of that, and then they go from there. And then the third person, maybe instead of counting them per se, lines them all up and then just counts the rows and the columns. Every one of those ways technically can get them to the right answer, in the same way as like using the Echo of Wisdom's analogy. It's like you may use this item to get from point A to point B. You may not use any items to get from point A to point B. Or you may use fully everything at your disposal to get from point A to point B. All of them are correct. The only thing that has said is, we told you to just get from point A to point B. That's it. And they already taught you how to play the game, so you didn't have to get relearned on this. They were just like, all right, you have all these. Go for it. Like, that's kind of where I was more going at with the math side of things. Not like a standardized test, but like you're able to kind of break something down, whatever makes sense to you. Like, you're not necessarily going to have the same thought process as another person. Like, if you and I, like, played the same puzzle game, for example, and we both got to the end, but with vastly different ways, we still beat the game, right?
No, well, yes, and that no matter how you do it, it's still valid. And I think that's kind of like the point you're getting to here is it's like everyone's going to have their own idea of how to do it, and it should be a correct way to do it. And I agree with that. I think they should all be like acceptable answers. I just think it would be nice too to have some level of like here's an intended answer, but we've also made sure because of the broad scope of our game that you can find other like you'll have other ways to do this and it'll still work. Like I was thinking kind of on my next point here, I was thinking about when Breath of the Wild came out in 2017. I didn't pick that up. I picked up Super Mario Odyssey. Every like linear level in that game, like every linear like side area has an intended way for you to get to the end. But you can also totally say screw it and like use whatever acrobatic tricks up your sleeve to get to the end a totally different way. But and that's then because you made it to the end, you're still getting the result that you want. And that still works and that's good and that should be the case. But they still clearly left all the pieces there to where if you just want to like put together the puzzle, it makes sense. Whereas I think some of the puzzle design in these more open world games are just like so broad that it's like not clear at all if there's any way that just could be an intended way. And I just prefer puzzles that are like clear like that. That's not to say there aren't any of those. Like I think about, even though they're not beloved because of their control method and rightly so, I'm thinking about like the ball puzzles. For the most part, those puzzles where you have to move the ball around with the gyro have one way you have to do it. But I mean, you can kind of screw around with them and like totally launch it and still land in the right area and get to the end. But I don't know. At the end of the day, this is really more of a philosophical like, how big do you want stuff? When does it become overwhelming for you kind of thing, and that's going to be different for everyone.
Well, right. All right. So we're down to our last picks for this episode. Then, all right. What is the third one you want to hear me blab about there, Brandon?
Well, I feel like it would be very apropos based on what I just talked about for you to talk about because it's kind of in a somewhat similar way. I want to hear then why you feel this kind of similar way about Minecraft or Terraria, or how can you differentiate like what I was just talking about?
So, for me personally, and I am going to be very upfront about this, I have not spent the most amount of time in both games. I have played Minecraft a decent amount. I played Terraria a little less than that. So I'm going off of very minimal opinions on what I think of this game. I think from my personal standpoint, the thing that is the most difficult for me to handle, and this is gonna sound stupid because I know there's tutorials and all this stuff on YouTube that I could just go look at if I really wanted to. The overwhelming decisions that you have to make in that game is absolutely hard for me to like comprehend. You start off in the middle of nowhere and you kind of just do whatever you want, where it's literally they drop you in and say, okay, have fun. And the equivalent of like when your parents drop you off at the playground for the first time and you have no idea what's going on. For me, it's like there is so much stuff in that game between like, and I know that like there's creative modes that people can only play, which would all part of the problem, but it's like for me, it's like I wanted to play it like how it was intended, with like the dangers actually involved in there. Like, for example, when I first played it, I did not know you could have a creeper spawn in a random dark room that you just built because, hey, it turns out they just don't care and they're just like, and suddenly you have a creeper now in a 1x1x1 block room that is going to absolutely explode and you're going to hate life in here in a second. Like, I want to be creative in that game, and it's a very open game that gives you a lot of freedom. But for me, I am not that level of creative if that makes sense. Like, I am the equivalent of like someone who will build a block house out of what is available to him, and then watch someone who does the same thing and they make like a mansion somehow. Like, you've seen like Lego Masters, like
Yeah, yeah,
Fortnite,
yeah,
I assume,
yeah.
right? Like that. It's like the people who play Minecraft. They are the Lego Masters of the video game world in my eyes. I am the person who literally needs all these instructions just to put together a simple 5 block thing that I have owned since I was like 10. But I digress on that whole front. But the point is that like the overwhelming decision making that you have to do in that game is like kind of be alert at all times. You gotta keep your food up. You gotta keep yourself safe and warm and all these other things. And then on top of it, there's, in addition to that, all these things that you can do. You can make farms, you can make homes, you can destroy everything and be a literal god of war if you really want to. The freedom of it is so overwhelming that I have to almost dial myself back in a little bit because I'm sitting there and I'm like, holy crap, this is too much for even me. And I have no gripe with that game either. I just am the type of person who cannot get that invested in it. I think I can only play it for like an hour or two at a time when I have played it. It's so hard to just do that because it's like, I remember like I was playing with a group of 4 people once, and everyone else knew what they were doing and knew what they were going to do. And I had no clue what any of them were talking about. And this is like one of the first times that I played Minecraft with anybody in general. So just the amount of stuff that comes at you in that game can be a lot for someone who didn't grow up with it. Because like it is effectively a generation game at this point. Because people have been playing it since like they were probably in elementary school. And I was playing it for the first time in my late 20s, and I had no idea what was going on. Like it was the most time. It was the most time that I've ever felt like a boomer in that instance.
Well, and a lot of that you just described, I think, is a little bit more extreme of like kind of how felt with Zelda too, like what I was just describing. Like when I
Yeah.
think about Tears of the Kingdom with the Ultra Hand, it's like I can just fuse anything together. It's like, what? I don't have any ideas of what to make like this. I just want to have a thing, and like it's kind of, it's not nearly as open as Minecraft, clearly, because in that you don't really have a goal. Like you have quests, you have things you can do, but that's why I wanted to pick when I saw that you had it on the list, and I was like, oh, this would be a great thing to follow up with the Zelda one, because I think, you're kind of like, I agree, and I appreciate you being like the devil's advocate for the other side of this here too. But like, clearly, like these kinds of experiences can still be like the same across games, whether they're more or less limited. And it's just like I think there becomes a law of diminishing returns with freedom that like people don't quite realize, because you have to be that creative person, and not everyone is that creative person, or they're like creative in their own different ways, even though like on paper, in theory, it should be this amazing, fantastic thing across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I pretty much co-sign everything you have had to say on Minecraft, because I've never really gotten into that for that exact reason. Like I could come up with stuff that could be interesting or would be interesting, but
Right.
I want to have something to like, this is what I need to do in the game. I like goals, and it has no goals, and I don't like games with no goals.
Or at least not like goals that are not like at least pointed out. Like it's not like they just give you a prompt that just says survive and that's it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help me in any capacity. It's just a little bit of structure or some sort of at least outline to kind of get our feet wet would have been nice in the game. But like I said, there are YouTube tutorials. There are people who you probably know who have played this for how long, that if you really wanted to learn, you absolutely could. And kind of, this is the last point I'll make on it, and I don't think I wrote this on my notes here. I do think it shows a slight generational thing of creativity that is not necessarily like as I want to make sure I say this right because it's going to sound odd no matter how I say it. I think it illustrates the problem as an adult that I feel like we are severely less creative the older we get. So for the kids who grew up with Minecraft, who are like probably in their 20s now, and they are still these really creative individuals, I applaud you. Because I think Minecraft definitely helped them kind of shape that creativity side the way that, like, when you're in like kindergarten or like elementary school, that you are creative in the sense of like you don't care what people think, you're just going to make. And I applaud that level of thinking that anyone can have. Creativity is supposed to be trial and error, but we have so much of a fear of the error part that we don't begin to even attempt it. And I really think that is something that I wish that more adults in general were not afraid to do. Whether it's, you know, writing a book, putting on a show, creating art, whatever it might be, I do think that, like, as adults, and depending on how you are raised, I'm not saying it's all adults, I think adults typically have a bigger issue with trying to find ways to be creative because as a societal group, I'm not saying all of society, but like depending on where you are, what that group is doing that you're currently part of, they have a status quo and they do not want to derive from it. And that is the more upsetting thing. I think we just don't reward creativity even if it fails as much as we probably should. Not saying it has to be participation trophied, but like at the bare minimum, let's give them at least some recognition for like, okay, you tried something, it didn't work. How do we make it better? How do we improve upon it? What do you think could be done better, or what would you like to see now that you've seen it in person and you're not like the biggest fan of it?
Yeah, I agree. I think what you said with the rewarding, like a lack of rewarding creativity, is a big thing with it because you're just like, I think about like the drawings you might put up that are like on your mom's refrigerator as a kid. Like, those were nice, but it's not the same as then being in school and then you make something that might be, I guess, kind of similar. This analogy doesn't perfectly work because it assumes like you're a little kid completely along the way, but obviously you grow up and get better at it. But when you get a bad grade on a piece of art in art class, well now, and you thought it was an amazing creative kind of thing, it doesn't feel as good anymore because you failed, like you pointed out. You didn't do as well as this amazing idea you had in your head.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that was the last point I wanted to bring up on the Minecraft Terraria debate because I know both of them are kind of in the same breath when it comes down to it. So, all right.
I'll also say with creativity, and with adults is like this is a creative thing for us too. I think a lot, like when you get older, you find the way that you just want to be creative. You aren't just creative like across the board, and that's okay.
And I think that's a huge thing too. But yeah, let's move on. You have one more game, and I'm going to be completely honest. This one caught me off guard, but I really want to hear the logic on this one.
You were not prepared for this, were you? I know. I remember when I put it on the list, I was like, oh, I might have to do this one because I think this could. I'm not saying it's going to get like sparks flying here, but it's like I think this could be interesting discussion.
These types of games, like it is very, very surprising because I've never heard anyone feel like that they not hated, but like it's not like they were ever like as like you know what I mean? I don't have a better way to phrase it than that. It's just, I don't know. I gotta hear your opinions on this.
Okay, so to make this clear for everyone, we're talking about one of the many Junior Adventure series, one of those humongous entertainment games, and I'm particularly talking about the Pajama Sam games. So, everyone has
one of the biggest ones, but okay.
Huh?
One of the biggest ones, but okay.
I know. Well, everyone has their nostalgic PC games, right? And a lot of these humongous entertainment games are part of those. So, like for me, I had 3 of them. I had Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, I had Spy Fox and Dry Cereal, and I had Spy Fox Operations Ozone. And now there's a lot of other PC games that I had as a kid, but like for this conversation, those are the relevant ones. And between the 2 that I played, I like Spy Fox the best because it was most complex. And spies are like cool. And then I grew up and I did something like I'm doing right now, where it's like I'm listening or watching to something that's on the internet here. And I remember seeing videos about like a lot of people loved Pajama Sam in particular. And that makes some sense to me because, I wouldn't think there'd be a lot of nostalgia for Putt Putt because, well, that's the one that's targeted toward the youngest audience. So even if you grew up playing it, it probably doesn't hold the same kind of weight because it's not as complex. Freddy Fish, similar kind of idea. It's a little bit more complex. And I think for a lot of people it does hold up. But like, it seemed like Pajama Sam to me was like kind of a largely put on its own pedestal. Like, this is the best series of the bunch so far. So one of the last things I did, or like one of the last games I played before I moved into the apartment that I live in now, was I played the humongous classic collection. It's a physical re-release of 6 of the games. I believe it had a PS4 version as well, but I have the Switch version. No surprise. And that had Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, Putt Putt Travels Through Time, Freddy Fish 3, it's the conch one, Spy Fox and Dry Cereal, and then it had Pajama Sam 1 and 2 in it. And so I'd never played Freddy Fish and I'd never played Pajama Sam, except for maybe if there had been some demos in any of those games. I don't remember there being any of those in the versions that I played. But so for me, these are essentially new games. Like, I'd heard about them, I knew about them.
They're new to you, yeah.
Yeah, they're new to me. Like, I knew what people liked about them, but I was excited to like try it for myself. And I think it
as
ended
an adult, yes.
Right. For one thing, it's an adult. I'm an adult now instead of a kid playing this, right? But I think in the end, it ended up, for me, kind of being a victim of its hype and its nostalgia that people have, because people do talk about them so highly that it's like they've got really high expectations to meet in my mind. And I certainly see the pieces that people are talking about with them. Like, I see in, when I think about the first game, like, it's really different to have these areas that are dark as opposed to like all the other games are largely really bright and very colorful. And I like that contrast. I like how it's a lot of just like inanimate objects becoming characters, and it's largely like imagination. So it's like I see all that, and again, it I think playing it as a grown-up adult person definitely kind of hinders this, right? But that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't feel necessarily as like, this is hitting me in like a whoa, this is cool kind of way. Like, when for people who grew up like with those 3 classic games, to me they kind of look at them in the way that I look at Spy Fox. That was my interest, like the game or the series of the bunch that I thought was the best. And I can think of legitimate reasons. I like its complexity. It's got puzzles, but it's also got the talk balloons, which are like its own little kind of puzzle. You need to get information from other characters. Then you've got spy gadgets involved in that too, where it's like you need to get that before you can solve the puzzle. I like the characters, but after that, when I was thinking about it, I was like, I'm starting to run out of steam, because when I think of what I like about that series, it applies to the other games too. So like when I think about Pajama Sam, I think about like, well, these are all things that I like, but they largely apply to the other games. And so, especially since they were like targeted toward children, I think it becomes, it's a lot like the way that I feel about, or like the kind of the argument that I've had. Funny that I'm bringing this up for the second time. The way that I feel about Mario Party. My theory on Mario Party is whichever game in the series you play first will be your favorite, no matter how well you recognize all the other ones may be better or how they may be worse. Whichever one you played first will be your favorite. In my case, like, having played Spy Fox so much, that one's always going to be my favorite, but I can still recognize where the others are good. I just think I think that's kind of a key thing with this, is we have to remember this discussion on the whole is games that are beloved that we don't like as much. it isn't necessarily games that we don't like at all. Some of them can be games we don't like at all, but this is one that I just don't like as much as others because I think it has really high expectations if you're someone coming into it new for the first time, but those expectations are based on the hype and the nostalgia from others. And now, is that going to stop me from doing the same thing to others with Spy Fox? Not necessarily, because that was my favorite. But I have to come out of it acknowledging, like, my experience is not going to be what someone else's is.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on it as... I think whatever we grew up as with those humongous games, like, especially the humongous entertainment games, all of those games widely vary. Because there's, like, Fatty Bear from, like, the OG. I think Fatty Bear might have been the first one, if I remember right. Or
I'm pretty sure that was the second one. I think the first one was the first Putt-Putt, and then it was Fatty Bear.
I mean, Fatty Bear is still early, but, like...
It's not a big deal. The point is, you're right. They're one of the first ones.
But I think the other thing, too, is that, like, Freddy Fish and Pajama Sam and Spy Fox, I think, and Putt-Putt also, I should argue, is also in there, were like the big four. Fatty Bear was kind of the one that fell on the wayside because I think they only gave him like one game, and everyone else got at least 2 games, if I remember right. Some had 3, blah, blah, blah. And I think with the Pajama Sam argument for you, what I'm hearing is, I think it's because of the fact that you played it so late, you don't have the attachment that a lot of that audience probably would have. Like, because for me, I know I played like Freddy Fish and Pajama Sam and Putt-Putt growing up. I don't remember how many of them I actually legitimately finished, but I do remember playing them, and I do have a soft spot for those characters. I was more with like the backyard sports games. That was the humongous stuff that I was into. But I do think also that at the end of the day, I don't think it's anything inherently wrong with it. I think a lot of what was good about those games was it was just, these are what kids are probably imagining during, like, if you give them this scenario, like say, all right, you're a spy that's a fox and you're having to save the world from running out of milk. This is exactly what a 6-year-old is going to believe. Mm-hmm. In the same way as, oh, you're a little kid who's afraid of the dark, but he's going to be a superhero by tackling the darkness that's in his closet. Like, that's exactly how I would envision this, like, as a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old or whatever. I think they do a great job in terms of, this is just to give you a point of view of, this is a kid with an imagination. And for the younger audience that it was designed for, that's what they were thinking. That's why they were so like, oh, this is so cool. And then as adults, it's like, if you didn't grow up with that, you're not going to get that same, feeling. And right. That's okay.
I think what the games themselves set out to do is very good. And it is, like, the 2 games that I played are good games. I don't have any issue, like, with the games themselves. I think maybe we need to, like, take a step back as, like, people who grew up with these and remember that, like, you can only hype them so much, because if you're trying to convince someone new to play it, they're just not going to have that. They're never going to have that memory you had. They're never going to have, like you said, that memory of like, whoa, that is kind of like how it feels like with the dark in my closet. Like, yeah, I would like to take it on. Like, you can see that and as an adult and be like, oh, that's cute. That's amusing. And I think that's the way that it would happen, but it's not your experience anymore, too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've kind of come to the conclusion to this. We're on one of our slightly, for recently, longer episodes now.
To be fair, we did talk quite a bit on the Switch 2 stuff. That, I think, was where we lost a little bit at that time.
Well, yeah, no, and there was still more stuff with that we could have talked about, but I wanted to keep that firm to, like, half hour and let the main topic breathe for what it needs to be. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, but I think we covered, like, the biggest, most important stuff. The only other things we didn't really hit on are, like, we've got some, like, goods and bad stuff with the key cards going on right now.
Oh, right. But yeah, those are at least our 3 right now. If you guys want to hear us talk more about this, by all means, we will do another follow-up episode. I've still got 3 other ones I want to talk about at some point.
Well, and I think I got at least a good dozen games on a list for this, and I even thought up a few that, kind of like you said, were in the opposite vein, where it's like, I like this game, other people don't like it as much, but I can back up why I think it's a better game than they'd say. But yes, that, I think, takes us to the end of this episode. So please, listeners, do some engagement. That could be a like. That could be, subscribing to the show in some way. You could send us a voice message. The inbox is still empty and just only filled with dust and cobwebs, but I know it will be having a message put in it eventually. We did get a comment. You can comment, and we got a comment on episode 36 on Spotify. Obviously, if we were in a place with a ton of comments, I wouldn't read these off, but, since I would want to listen to voicemails, I think this is kind of a good, sort of analog to that. So on episode 36, Spotify user Youngers said, quote, "I know I'll get the Switch 2 at some point, but it might have to be a gift or I will buy it for myself on Black Friday." And that kind of seems to be the same conclusion we got through with this as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
So thank you, Youngers, for the comment. If anyone else has stuff that they want to say, they're welcome to do so as well. But with that, I think we are ready to sign off.
I'm going to say one more thing, too, just to kind of touch on something we brought up during the Minecraft discussion on this episode. If you are struggling to be creative in general, if you have ideas but you don't know how to put them out there, whether it's writing, painting, dancing, whatever it might be, just do it.
Just do it.
It's something that not enough people talk about, is that you aren't going to succeed if you don't try. You may fail. That is the risk. But I would rather be in a position where someone took a risk to be creative and failed versus we didn't at least get to see that idea at least attempt to get to fruition. So whatever it might be that you are sitting on, if there's an idea that you want to do, or if you don't feel like you have any way to properly discuss it or properly put it out there, just do yourself a favor and do it. It can just be for yourself. It can be for family, friends, whatever it might be. But at least put an effort in for your own self. This is not supposed to be for anyone else. I mean, we are doing this podcast because this is what we want to do.
Yep. There's a reason why, even though it's kind of a generic name, obviously, there's a reason why I called it at the start the Creative Outlet Podcast, because it's for me. That's my creative outlet, right? So it's the same kind of idea. You should be making your equivalent of that, and if you get value out of it, we certainly appreciate it, but at the end of the day, you got to make it for you.
I am hoping at some point, whenever I get some downtime, I'm going to actually make an attempt to paint something for the first time, an actual painting. My girlfriend has done canvas paintings, and I actually wanted to take a crack at it, but part of the problem is I don't have the supplies, so I will follow up with that whenever I get around to that, but that is a later thing when I actually have time and the supplies to sit down and do that. But when
I think that could make either a good topic or a good mini topic. I'm not sure what would end up being, but I agree. I'm interested in that discussion.
I will definitely try to at least get a picture. So whenever we do put this out there, Brandon will be able to at least show what it is. My idea I have in my head, I already kind of know what I want to do with it, but I need to get the supplies and find the time for it. So whenever it's done, I will bring it back up. I will send it to Brandon, and Brandon can chew it out and tell me that it's the worst thing he's ever seen. Or
no,
he can say this is better than the Sistine Chapel. It won't be, but the important thing is, and I cannot stress this enough, make the thing for you. Just be creative for yourself. That's all we could ever want. Find a way to express yourself. And I promise you, you will be much happier that you got it out there than if you just kept it bottled up.
I could not agree more. Another great sentiment to end an episode on. You have this knack here for ending our episodes on really nice, positive notes like this. I like it.
Which is sad because this is the only one that I remember doing that for. But hey, I will take that compliment.
Well. There are other ones that I can think of where it's that's a good sentiment to end on, but you're right, I can't remember the full specifics, but it's I know I've given that comment 2 or 3 times. This is for sure the 3rd or 4th time that I've done it.
That means you guys should re-listen to the podcast and tell me when I actually was doing it.
I can go to the ends and kind of bring them up too, I'm sure. But anyway, I think that leaves it out for us. So I am Brandon.
And I am hungry.
And we will come here next time to talk again for hopefully less than 2 hours again. Thank you for listening.
Bye now.